Alright, so somebody had asked in the YouTube comments if I could make a video talking about some of my favorite decks to ladder with, and there's a bunch of thumbs up, so I kind of wanted to do something in that vein, but I feel like I've talked a lot of those decks to death, and well, we'll revisit some of them today, but instead I wanted to take one deck from each of the, I think, most popular archetypes in Classic. So these four right here, talk about my favorites from those and why I like them more so than, how to pilot them kind of thing. So taking a look at Rogue here, this Aggro Rogue. This is Backspace Rogue. I like this deck for a couple of reasons. The first reason being it's not Miracle Rogue, so it's just a different way to experience Rogue, and it's kind of my preferable way to do it. I think those are the only two Rogue decks that really are competitive up in Legend. And yeah, this one just plays a little bit different than some of the other aggro decks. That's the second reason I like it. I think a big part of that is the fact that the hero power can be used to clear very small minions or be used in conjunction with other stuff to clear minions. And there's a reasonable amount of decision making with the deck. A lot of the time you're just sending damage to your opponent's face, but there's certain cards in here like SI will be used as a board clear tool a lot of the time. Eviscerate's a bit of a question mark. Who do you actually end up sapping? You don't want to waste it too early on something like a Harvest Golem, which could kind of farm your minions if you're expecting bigger taunts later, but sometimes that's the right choice. Arcane Golem, am I okay giving them extra mana now, or do I want to save this as kind of a finisher? There's a few choices to make, like with most aggro decks. It's kind of refined. Your options are really reined in, and games just tend to go quicker. But yeah, overall, I like the deck. It's competitive. Fun way to experience Rogue. Midrange. It's a Midrange Shaman list. I've talked about this a lot. And I think there's a lot of ways that you can actually play the deck, build the deck, but what I really like about this mid-range list in particular is I think it's played different than a lot of other mid-range lists. So I just want to bring the curve up here because I think most mid-range lists in Classic tend to go with this idea of just playing the best thing you have on curve. So you want a 1-drop into a 2, into a 3, into a 4. If you think of something like Paladin, it's easy to buff minions that are on the board or equip a True Silver at 4, kind of take out minions, and you just build a pretty substantial board in the mid game, get a lot of value out of that, and they all kind of cap out at different places, some around 6, 7, 8 mana. But for the most part, that's kind of what you're hoping to do. And then when you don't get that perfect draw, that's where decisions come into play. But with Midrange Shaman, you can see it's super weak at the 2-drop spot. And it's just kind of janky and all over the place as far as, where it's loaded up. But that's for a couple different reasons. One is because you want to get a ton of value from your hero power. So you're actually okay on 2 just pressing your hero power in a lot of matchups, not every single one, because you want to be able to use things like Flame Tongue to be able to help with it. Some of these lists will run Abusive Sergeant as well. It's another way to kind of buff it. You could even toss in a Bloodlust, and maybe you're getting value from that. But you also start to thin the pool of totems, which starts to make things more predictable. Later into the game, if you're hitting your hero power a lot, you might be going with a 50-50 chance to roll a taunt totem or a spell power totem, which can be really, really useful in certain situations. So you're trying to milk that as much as possible. But the other reason that the curve is kind of janky is the overload effect, right? Do I actually want to play Feral Spirits on 2, or on 3, excuse me? Sometimes you do. It's going to leave you with 2 mana the following turn, which maybe you're okay to hero power it, maybe you want a Flame Tongue, something like that. And in other cases, you want to save that because that overload effect is, well, it's too drastic to be taken. Lightning Storm as well. Another one where you really have to decide to play it at the right time. So I think there's just so much to consider with this list. You're not just playing things on curve. Maybe you're trying to build a board to bait out a Brawl or a Baron Geddon against a Warrior. It's really, really interesting. You need to know the opponent's deck, how it's played. You need to understand your deck and how it's played. Think of all kinds of possibilities and outs. And yeah, I think the skill cap is very, very high, and it often goes unrecognized because it does look something like hero power pass or hero power and maybe like one spell or a small minion, which seems just kind of like a whatever play, but there's so much going through the player's head. And yeah, I just really like that playstyle because it varies a lot from other mid-range decks. Not to mention it's just good. Control Hunter. I've talked a lot about this. My heart has always been with Control Warrior. Back when the game first came out, I would play Control Warrior in pretty much every expansion that I could. But I kind of exhausted things then when Classic came back out. So the emergence of Hunter, now it's getting more popular. We've seen this Control variant. We've seen Trap Hunters getting very popular recently. It feels fresh, and there's a lot that I think is still left to be done with Hunter in general as a class. Why I'm really excited about it and why I specifically picked it for one of my favorite decks here is the hope that bots are going to make their way out of the game. Now that reporting's been introduced, if we maybe give it a couple weeks, fingers crossed Blizzard takes some action. And if we can get those Zoo bots out of the pool, get those Warrior bots out of the pool, I think this list can be played with and refined some more. Right now, it's teched pretty well against, or at least to consider the possibility of that Zoo matchup, of that stupid Control Warrior bot variant that we keep seeing. I'm really excited to see this against, a pool of mainly druids and rogues, maybe some handlock in there. What does this list actually shape up to be when you're facing more of those kind of meta decks and maybe even some more variants? Like, is Freeze Mage going to become a thing? Do I want a single flare in here? Who knows? Maybe some Paladin as well. Some of those kind of off meta classes might have to come into consideration with the deck building. So it's just, it feels like an unfinished project that I've really just been using to farm Zoobots recently, and it's made it kind of underwhelming. It's not satisfying, even if you're winning a lot of games, to have it do that. But I think there's a bright future for this, one that I'm excited about. So Control Hunter, still up there in the realm of excitement. And then when it comes to combo decks, generally speaking, I don't like combo decks. Let's just bring this up. But I want to talk about why I don't like combo decks. They tend to take two different forms. There's the Druid and Handlock kind of combo variant, which I feel like you just play the game. The rest of the deck outside of any combo with Force of Nature, Savage Roar, or with Leroy, Power Overwhelming, Faceless, the rest of the deck is very, very good, and you are just kind of playing to that game plan. You're drawing sometimes very early with Ancient of Lore because of Innervate's Wild Growth, and still securing the board. With Handlock, you're mashing your hero power, you're drawing to play early Mountain Giants, beef up those Drakes, and then of course you're going to end up with the combo in hand. So it kind of just feels like a side effect. Well, once I'm late into the game, chances are I'm going to have that combo and have a bunch of burst, but you don't really feel like you're sacrificing anything as you're building that combo. And then the other style that I don't like is that sort of Miracle Rogue Freeze Mage style, where it just feels too independent. People joke about it feeling like a game of solitaire. I often feel that way, just not a lot of interactivity with your opponent. Obviously, some, but with something like Freeze Mage, where you're completely freezing your opponent's board, you're putting up an ice block, so you're just completely unkillable. Sometimes you have these situations where the game is just out of hand. You're going to win in a few turns, but you have to play it out. Okay, I'm going to ice block, and then I'm going to Alex, and then I'm going to use my burn. And there's really not a lot your opponent can do unless they happen to be running a flare or something like that. But this combo warrior, which I haven't played all that much, but I've played a few different kind of Worgen variants here with it. This one sticks out a little bit because I feel like there's more interactivity with your opponent and more decision making as far as, yeah, do I want to draw? Do I want to fight for the board? Do I want to do a little bit of chip damage? Something like an Acolyte of Pain could be a target for Inner Rage. You get the draw, you get that extra attack, and then do I want to hit a minion? Do I want to send that to their face? Because now that's less damage that I need from my Worgen to be able to finish my opponent off, right? It's this big, very complicated combo. I can get all the pieces together and do 30 plus damage, or I can kind of chip away at their health, and then maybe I only need to do 16 or 20, something like that. So yeah, it feels like a lot of flexibility, a lot of decision making, and because I don't generally like the combo style of things, I haven't played it that much, it does still feel a little bit fresh. Anytime I do an OTK warrior, a Worgen warrior, I feel like I'm still learning. I feel like I'm relearning some of the basic rules of the game as to, when to draw, when to fight for the board, when to go face. So it keeps things interesting, and it's something that, again, if the bots can just drop off the face of the earth, I'm hoping to play this against some of those more meta decks as well. Yeah, how does it fare against Druid and Rogue? I'm very curious. But it actually keeps things like the Zoo matchups pretty exciting as well, because you are fighting for the board and having to make some interesting decisions. So there it is, 4 decks, 4 different archetypes, things I like to play. I know there's other archetypes out there that are just less popular, a mill or a fatigue or whatever. You can come up with all kinds of different stuff. But hopefully it gives you an idea of some things that I like to play. I don't know, people seem to want to hear it, so hopefully this is entertaining. And yeah. Hopefully there's some more interesting stuff to come from these going forward with the hopeful decline of bots on ladder.